Alright, the Kailh Polia switch. Totally not my second time filming this because I forgot to hit the record button on my phone, but whatever. I suppose refining my script is a little bit better than just one timing it, right? So anyway, the Polia switch actually hasn't been a new release or anything. These guys have been around for quite a while in terms of, say, how fast switches have been coming out lately. It seems like I turn around and suddenly there's another recolor, and I'm just like, oh, well, I guess I'm not buying that one. But anyway, here we have the Kailh Polia switch, and supposedly, according to Novelkeys, back when they first stocked it, you can use the stem as a Holy Panda maker. So you can put it inside a YOK housing or whatever to make Holy Pandas, and you would have the stem act as that Holy Panda maker, for lack of a better term. And I'm actually inclined to agree, because when I looked at it from a standpoint, the stem in itself has that little bottom out on the bottom, little nub, right? And the tactile legs seem to be pretty decent. And when I compared it to the original OG switch, in which you were to take apart to make your supposed Holy Pandas, the Halo Clear, or the Halo series, it feels actually really similar, and the stem, of course, also has the long length. So let's take a look at the Halo Clear real quick. So, no pre-travel. Kind of a iffy bump here. And then, of course, it doesn't clear the top housing, indicative of its longer stem. And for the Polia, it is a very similar experience, where, of course, there's no pre-travel. You have arguably a sharper bump here, most likely because it is a lighter spring, and of course it doesn't clear the top housing. That's how far it goes. And I have to say, I think Novelkeys did themselves good by making these Polias go on sale, because currently the clearance sale for these are still going on, and I am surprised either by the fact that nobody has either heard of using these, or perhaps people are not buying Holy Panda-esque parts anymore because of the Boba U4Ts and other rivals on the market at the moment. But the Polias are currently your best bet, in my opinion, to make a Holy Panda-esque switch because of how cheap it is. Normally, if you were to buy Halo switches, if you want to buy 90, it costs like $45, right? However, if you go onto Novelkeys' site right now and you go to the clearance section, Polia switches at the moment, if you want to buy 110 of them, it only runs you $33. $33. Think about it, for 110 switches. Alright? So basically, they're only 30 cents a switch, and that is literally 33% cheaper than buying one of these off drop. Assuming that you're not already buying the Holy Panda switch off of drop anyway, but those are already expensive. So if you were to buy, say, the YOK Purple Panda off of Novelkeys as well, let me see if I can find it. They have the YOK Panda switches, we have the Trash Panda and the Purple Trash Panda. If you were to buy the YOK Panda switches off of Novelkeys at the moment, which cost $60 and 50 cents for 110, and then you use a coupon for 5% off, they're actually not bad for value, in my opinion. And even then, even if you don't want to make Holy Panda-esque switches off the YOK Pandas off of Novelkeys, you have Halo stems, essentially, for 33% off. And that's a really good deal, in my opinion. And so I'm not really going to review a Kailh Polia, because the majority of the search results that come up on YouTube that review the switch, basically I agree with pretty much whatever they say. It's a decent tactile, but in terms of value, at the original price, it just wasn't there. Especially when they were literally more expensive than some other premium switches you would get for the same price. So for example, if I were to go back to the Kailh Polia listings on Novelkeys at the moment, back then for 110 of them, it would cost you $33 times 2, meaning $66. So the fact that they're 50% off and they're on clearance sale and they haven't sold out yet in either capacity, 70, 90, or 110, blows my mind. And maybe perhaps the U4Ts have taken over, which I'm glad they did, all props to Gazoo. But even then, like, if anyone just wanted to harvest Halo-esque switches, at least for the stem, dude, you're missing out. Kailh Polia, grab them if you can. And they actually look kind of cool with the little like taro looking blue on it. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is for me to actually hybridize these things because, you know, why not stick the Polia switches into pretty much anything I can find in my Switch collection? So, well, I mean, why not? So here, we have a bunch of switches. We have a little velvet blue PME tactile. We have a TTC brown. We have a Novel Keys chocolate cream. I was told that these were retooled because apparently creams did go through a retooling in late 2020. So therefore, that's why this stem looks like it doesn't clear the top anymore compared to the standard cream, but it doesn't really make much of a difference because it still causes interference. We have a standard Cherry MX brown. We have a Gateron clear. We have one of the most common switches out there, the Altemu brown. We have an Akko rose red switch, or whatever, rose switch I suppose. And I also have a boba housing, not that Halo switch, sorry. I do have a boba housing when I'm making U4Ts because currently I'm trying to make U4s out of, well, I'm just making U4s that are 55 gram. I'm putting them inside that Royal Kluge RK84. I just haven't found the time yet because I've been making videos with Genshin for those that sub to the channel because of that. And just as a wild card, I also have an Everglide Oreo here. However, it's not your standard Everglide Oreo. We have a Halo stem in here. And I honestly hate this for how much it sucks because it's so jagged and like it feels super stiff to bottom out on. But I just wanted to put it in there because most likely it's going to replicate the same experience if you were to put a Polia switch in it or Polia stem, so whatever. Anyway, I'm going to get to work. I'm going to disassemble all these switches and I'm going to see how they feel like. Lubed and of course unlubed. Alright, looks like all we got is basically Polia Franken switches now. Look at all these beautiful stems inside these switches. I gotta say, aesthetically, the Polia stems look pretty cool. Like, for example, look at this velvet PME. It just looks like a blue switch with a Polia stem sticking out of it, which has a pretty good color match. This looks like weirdo mode. But look at this boba. This boba with the Polia stem sticking out of it looks pretty cool. I think the cherry with the Polia stem also looks pretty cool out of it. Regardless, it just looks kind of cool. Even look at this like Akko red switch. Just has a certain charm to it. But anyway, yeah. So these actually are not bad. I'm assuming this is what happens when you put a Halo stem in anything, but these actually feel really good. I think the most, what do you call it, prominent one that people will probably be trying is, I know that people made holy bobas, or hobos, I don't know. I forgot what Kiwi said about it. But let's start with the boba switches. So this is a boba housing and spring. It's 55 gram because I like my tactiles light, and it's very, very sharp because it originally supposed to be a tactile leaf, right? So no pre-travel, of course, but it just gives, like, boom. Look at that. And there's not much post-travel, but I would definitely give this switch the sharpest award because it has the most sudden drop out of any of the ones that I've tried so far. And I quite like it. Next, I would say the cheapest one that I got, because these are discontinued. These are TTC Gold V2s, and this is the brown switch, and I put the Polia stem in there. And, to no one's surprise, albeit scratchy, it's tactile. Look at that. I wouldn't say it beats out the boba though. So at the end, I'm gonna just put like a ranking to put like perhaps least tactile to most tactile. Let's try the most common denominator, which is the Altemu Brown. Ooh. These are decently tactile as well. These are Altemu Browns, so they have a light-ish spring and very good feedback. I would say with the long poles or the long stems, in terms of that, they actually do create a very similar sound profile. There's always this clack when you bottom out. Let's try the cherry. This is a cherry MX Brown, replaced with a Polia stem. Also pretty good. I would say if you have some cherries lying around and trying to make some holy cherries, not a bad idea. And the most interesting one, in my opinion, because it just looks cool. This is the, what is this? Tech C. I heard mixed reviews about the Tech C brand switches, but regardless of these have the roundest bump out of the ones I've felt. Like there's quite a lot of roundness here, as you can see from the bump. Like you can tell that it's not a sudden drop. It's like it kind of floats its way up, which is a very interesting sensation. I can't say I've quite had this before. These are, of course, the creams, and of course, back then when you put the Halo stems into it, they would call it Paco switches. I'm pretty sure that one of Teja's most recognizable videos, other than the gel with the Holy Pandas in it, would be the Paco stream with the SA keycaps. Those sounded very interesting. But let's take a look at these. It's tactile, but something's off about it. I would say it mimics the experience of It mimics the experience of these, but I think it's because of the stiff spring that there's less tactility in it. So take that for what you will. But I'm not too much of a fan. Here is arguably the cheapest option out of every switch on here, because these are only $10 for a pack of 45. Okay, so these aren't as tactile, however, they are smooth. This is a very smooth feeling tactile because Akko switches, the ones that you buy for $10, they're really good stock switches. So I think with the factory lubing and just the fact that it's a really good weight in general, they make for a good medium tactile, in my opinion. It isn't jarring like the Boba one, but it's still round enough to be familiar, for lack of a better term. And of course, last but not least, we have the Gatoron Clear, and I would say this would be my least favorite, but only because of the fact that I think it's because of the spring. This thing gives like soft pudding. Like I just touch my finger and it drops. But I can't say that it's not tactile. As you can see, it's clearly bouncing. I think it's just because of the spring weight. It's probably going against it, because this is the only Gatoron Linear that I have left, because the others I've used in boards and or only have one left and they're in my collection. But in terms of like an actual Gatoron Linear housing, if I were to gauge the tactile bump, I'd say that it's probably the weakest out of all the ones here, but only probably because of the fact it's a Gatoron Linear and nothing else. But either way, it's still tactile. So if you have a bunch of these lying around, like JYMV with his like what 2,000 plus Gatoron yellows, I feel like putting a Polia stem in it is not the worst thing you can do. Now, do I want to lube and film these? I probably don't, because to be fair, I don't think it really needs that because everyone's method of lubing tactiles is different. So I think in terms of the video, I'll call it here. Alright, sorry that it's taken so long. My tripod broke and I couldn't find a replacement. So right now, I don't know how this is holding up, but I like sort of duct taped my old tripod together. Yeah, I'm an idiot. I should have bought one on Prime Day, but I didn't because I forgot about it. Anywho, we now have a collection of switches, which that I am proud to present, with all the Kailh Polia stems in them. And disregard anything I said about having them completely stock, because I'm actually going to be doing them lubed. However, I would say that my lubing technique is consistent enough to the point where I can probably advise accurately enough for people to have a good idea. So, as it stands, currently, we have the Outemu, the Kailh Chocolate, the Gatoron Clear that I actually swapped out for a Gatoron Yellow Spring just to make it more accessible because not everyone wants Gatoron Clears, and an Aqua Rose Pink, a Cherry, a Boba, and of course the TTC Brown Gold V2. Let me turn on my voice recorder on my PC. Okay, it should be a lot better now. Audio should be a lot better. But let's just compare the sounds in front of the microphone first, because as I noticed earlier, if I were to have kept them stock, Spring Ping and the mostly the Spring Ping did actually cause a weird feel inconsistency, because springs vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So I decided just to do away with that and lube the springs, and I also lubed very lightly the stem and the legs because that's my personal preference. But in terms of just a disclaimer right now, that is how these switches will sound when you do it the same way I do, which is lube spring, lube rails, and lube legs, and everything else part of the stem. So I've come to a conclusion. Before we even start this, I have to pick my 3 favorites out of the entire bunch, and I don't think it should be any surprise as to what the results are, but I think the one surprise that may surprise a lot of people, I have to take a shot every time I say that word, is actually the Outemu one. The Outemu housings, for whatever reason, these are specifically Outemu browns, and you can find these, God knows, anywhere. You can look down under your pillow and probably find one. Don't quote me on that though. So, this particular housing, for whatever reason, makes it so that it is a very round bump, but considering how cheap it is, because you can literally buy a $20 Amazon keyboard and desolder and get these, and they are very, very good. There is no pre-travel here, of course, because it's a Polia stem. And then the overall experience with this is super smooth somehow, isn't it? It's very decent. Well, assuming of the fact that perhaps maybe you're on a budget where you want to replace your switches, but you don't want to buy any YOK switches off of Novel Keys to make Holy Pandas. These are not bad. I really think that if you had some random ass switches lying around from Outemu and you just put your stem in these, they actually serve as very good tactiles because the stem, of course, does the magic. In second place, if I can even call it that, is the Boba U4T, or specifically just the Boba housings in general. The Boba housings make a very sharp, and I mean sharp, tactile bump. It's most likely the tactile leaf doing the magic alongside the Polia stem, but I'm assuming this is what other people go through when they make hobas, or holy bobas, is when there's a very, 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 like, big resistance in the initial press. you can see how fast my finger drops, but it doesn't go as far as the Altemu ones go somehow, where it's just overall a very sudden drop, which some people really might like. And keep in mind the spring that I use in these, I personally like my bobas very light weighted, so I personally like them 55 grams. So this is a 55-gram spring inside this boba, and just by doing this, I can tell that this is probably the sharpest experience out of all the switches that I have tried in terms of my sample size that I mentioned earlier. But these are very, very sharp. Take a listen. Compared to the Altemu. And the third is actually from a Cherry MX Brown housing. This is a Cherry Polia. A Cherry Polia, in my opinion, is probably, I would say, what's the word? I would say it's like jack of all trades. What I like about them is that, albeit they're not as smooth and or tactile as the Altemu / Boba, it does offer enough tactility where you know that it's a Cherry MX Brown tactile leaf, but that contributes to the tactility, in my opinion. Because the chocolate ones, like the creams, I really don't like how the fact that you have to break it in. This is easily one of the more scratchy ones, and let me just hold up to the microphone for you to listen. I really don't like the feeling of the POM housing, and to be quite honest with you, albeit it is tactile and pretty round, I can't get over the initial scratchiness. That's just me though. If you're willing to break in your switches, perhaps you might have another experience to offer up in comparison to mine. Now, the Gatoron, I may tell you to take this with a grain of salt, because the grain of salt that I wish for you to take is that this particular switch is a Cherry MX Gatoron Clear, and that's a linear switch, so the leaf may be a bit different compared to a tactile one. However, it's still tactile, but as it stands, for some odd reason, I found that the Polia stem sticks out the most out of a Gatoron housing. So, albeit it is round and somewhat tactile, it bottoms out way too early. So here's the bump. It just feels a little too sudden for me. For the Akko Rose Reds, these are okay. I think these are the least tactile out of all of them, but that's still not saying much considering how tactile they are. But in terms of the stock spring and the housing, I don't know. I just kind of found them mediocre. And the TTC Gold V2 Browns, which actually are discontinued. I initially, for a year and a half, wanted to make a video on how to improve these switches, but I scrapped the video idea. But these, albeit they're pretty good, they still retain scratchiness from way back when. You can still hear it from here. So I wouldn't advise putting the Polia stems in these if you have them. However, they aren't a bad option if these are the only switches that you have. You will still be offered up a very tactile experience, as by the weightiness of how the switch falls and returns my finger. So with that being said, let's just do a quick sound test real quick in my little trusty acrylic switch tester, and I'll wrap the video up. All right, bringing back out this thing. Thank you, Alessio. And all I'm going to do is put them in order. I'll put the information on the screen like right on this side as per usual, and I'll angle the microphone downwards as that is the most proper way to do it, and just go in order. First without the keycap, and then of course after with the keycap. The keycap that I'll be using is a PBT die sub, control key. Alright, let's start with my favorites. I'll start with my Aotemu one, which is still interesting to me. Here we go. Let's bring out the keycap. Next, we'll take the boba, Polia. And of course, the Cherry MX Brown Polia. Alright, now let's set up with the runner-ups. The Aqua Rose Red. Moving on to the Gatoron one. Gatoron clear with a yellow spring, so it really is a weird switch, I would say. And now, keycap. Here we have the TTC Gold V2 Brown. What a mouthful, huh? Keycap on. It sounds somewhat rattly for some reason. What's the deal with that? It's funny because I lubed this thing, and yet somehow it still pings. Alright. Well, here's the chocolate cream, or basically a revised cream in 2021. Alright, and that should do it. Keep in mind, there's a specific reason why I didn't film these, and the reason why I didn't film these is because some of these don't react well to films. For example, here's what happens when you film a boba U4 housing with 0.15 millimeters switch films. Just for the record, when you film these with 0.15 millimeter switch films, not a good idea because they actually get stuck. This is a holy Polia, or a holy boba if you want to recreate it. If you use a thick film in this, it will get stuck. It's pretty tight on that tolerance, and here's some footage of it actually getting stuck. That's very interesting. Because you can fix it, but it gets stuck permanently. And it's kind of a disappointment to me because I actually quite like the switch. So yeah, be careful. So with that being said, before we wrap things up, here is a very quick sort of in a row comparison of all the switches next to each other. Alright, and that should be it. I don't really have much else to say other than the fact that I actually am quite happy that I found these Aotemu housings actually serve a purpose for those that may have some lying around and are on the fence of throwing them away. I've always found Aotemu browns to be a little bit more tactile than the brown competition, but otherwise, I think in terms of everything else, hey, Polia stems are on sale, and I think they still are. Last I checked, like 15 minutes ago, they're still being sold for $33 for 110 of these, so get them while you can. It seems like more and more people are picking up on it, but I feel like I should at least reinforce the fact that if you're looking for a replacement of Halo stems to Frankenswitch some other switches, whether it be YOK, whether it be Cherry, whatever, go pick them up. Polia stems are basically just Halo stems. So with that being said, please spread the word if you haven't already, because if you're looking for these Polia stems and you're not sure whether or not they're going to be offering some sort of tactile experience, or perhaps someone else is like, I wonder if Polia switches are worth it. Now they are, because now they are $33 for 110 switches. I shit you not. 30 cents a switch in terms of being able to Frankenstein something, or even just use them by themselves. Hey, I'm not going to judge if you do that. It's your keyboard. Keyboard hobbies and whatever are some of the most subjective hobbies on this entire planet. So with that being said, I've probably said this way too many times, but enjoy your day, and I hope that this video was of help. Expect the Prince Switch review to come out in the morning, assuming that you're watching this on the 24th of June. Prince switches are right here with me. and they're a very interesting switch. Alright, peace.